Do your songs sound better with a more punky, crunchy guitar tone like this? Or better with a more driven, thicker tone like this? If you've tried getting a great pop-punk guitar tone on your recordings, the chances are you've come across a Marshall JCM 800 amplifier plugin, which is responsible for so many of the guitar tones in your favourite songs, whether it be the amp sim version or the real thing. In this video, I'll go through 4 distinctly different JCM 800 amp sim plugins, and I'll show exactly how I dial in and mix a great tone for each of them, so you can decide which is better for your music and your sound. So the first amp I've pulled up here is the Brainworx Rockrack version 3, available via Plugin Alliance, and I've loaded this Crunch 800 setting here because that's obviously the JCM 800. Now I know with this Rockrack plugin, a lot of the tones are pretty thick and meaty, sort of more in the metal territory, so I'm going to try and dial it to sound more like a pop-punk guitar tone. Let's hear what the tone sounds like off the bat. Yeah, okay, so quite a bit of work to be done here. It's very thick. I'm not a fan of the gain too much, so I think we just need to simplify things on here. I'm going to turn this shred off for starters. I'm now going to flick through the cabinet section and find a cab that I think sounds best for pop punk. There we are. Straight away, that sounds punky, right? And that's what you'd do in a real studio, wouldn't you? You'd match up the right cab for the right amp to get the right kind of vibe and tone for something like this. Cool, so gain-wise, straight away I know, from hearing how the amp reacts at different gain levels, this amp is not going to give you a lower gain tone. Straight away from that, when I pushed the gain up, it sounded way better. So it's only really reacting in a way that I think is good and pro-sounding, with a bit more of a meaty, distorted tone. And that's fine. This is why we're doing this video, so you can get a gauge of which JCM 800 amp sim is going to work best for you. And with this gain knob, I'm trying to dial in, getting the amp to react and sound good, but also not too distorted so that you can still get clarity out of it. So straight away, that's overdoing it, and I hope you can hear that too. It's breaking up the sound so much, you're losing definition, you're losing the pick attack. I think around 4 to 5 definitely sounded best. Let's hear it in context with the song. Yeah, that's personally where I would set it, and that's a decision you can make, whether you push it a little bit more for a bit more, meat. So now let's refine this tone with a bit of mixing, and I'll do this with every single amp so that you can see how I would go about mixing the guitar tone rather than just setting one using these amp sims. So first thing I want to do is give it a little bit of harmonic saturation, emulating a bit of like outboard gear, because these guitars were recorded straight into an interface, so I kind of want to give it a bit of like analog magic. And there's a couple of ways you can do that, whether you use tape saturation or something like I'm using here, the Shep 73, which is a preamp emulation. I've always liked the Shep 73 and what it does to guitars when they're DI recorded straight into an interface. So that's why I'm still using it, because I still haven't found something that gives the same kind of vibe. See, straight away you can kind of just hear, it's hard to put your finger on, but it just gives it a little bit of like life, right? Listen to it on solo. Very subtle, but it does give it that kind of, this was a studio kind of feel. I'm going to push the input a little bit to get a bit more saturation out of it. And in doing so, I'll bring the output down so we're not tricking ourselves and thinking it's better because it's louder. Yeah, nice. Now let's EQ it. So when I EQ guitars, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll see this to be true. I'll set my high pass and low pass filters. I'll deal with those harsh resonant frequencies in the 2 to 4, 5 kilohertz areas. And then I will scoop out a little bit of honk from the mids. If we go back to the amp settings, maybe you caught this, I whacked the mids right up in the amp. And that's kind of like a secret or like a ninja move for pop punk rhythm guitars. The mids are where the guitars are going to live in your mix. And mids when it's rhythm, so it's like power chords being strummed hard, the mids is where the definition comes from. It was more when things started to become quite riffy in rock music, where you'd scoop the mids, especially in like metal where you'd be palm muting away, you'd get thick tones with lots of gain. But when you're strumming all those strings at once and you're really hitting it like a punk guitarist would, you actually want less of that gain, less of that scoop and more mids. So what we're actually doing is we're just going to refine it with this EQ. So first off, I'm going to set my high and low pass filters. Yeah, I like it. And just a quick side note here. Let me show you what happens if you over-filter that top end. You will effectively reveal really horrible, pokey, resonant frequencies because you're removing all of that sort of hissy noise that's covering them up. And that's kind of what we want to hear, really, with punk guitar and stuff. I always roll the extreme top end off, but if you go too far, listen to these resonant frequencies pop out that were previously hidden by, I guess, a mixture of all that sort of energy up there. Once you start to get rid of that, these horrible, pokey frequencies come out. Hear that horrible hiss? And I dragged this filter back to about 10K, and that hiss, you can't hear it anymore because it's sort of being smeared. And it sort of blends in with the others. And that also counts when you remove resonant frequencies with these tight notches, tight cues that we're going to do in a second. If you do it too much, you end up just revealing one pokey, horrible frequency or a couple that really stick out. So we're controlling it, but we're not getting rid of it, because we still want that bite and that attitude in there. It shouldn't be too smooth on your ear because it's pop punk at the end of the day, right? So it still have a bit of that edge, a bit of that roughness. Cool, so I think that'll do. And if you look, 2 decibels is by far the biggest cut I've done. 1.5, half a dB, half a dB. And listen to this off and on. See if you can see why I think it's important. I'm not killing them. I'm just sort of reducing them so that the guitar tone can be more focused and smoother, but we've still got a bit of edge in there. And we are going to use an EQ in the next step that brings the whole sort of upper mid-range up a little bit. Yeah, I'm just bringing that hiss out of your ear a little bit. And I learned a few days ago, actually, that everyone's ear canal is different. That frequency that I can really hear at 2.5K might be perceived differently to anyone else. It could be 2.7, 2.3, but that area is different for everyone, apparently. So 2.5 there, 2.5 is where I really hear it. But you might find it a bit different. Interesting fact. Right, now I'm going to cut out the honk so that we can still keep our mid-range boost from the amp, but just refine it a little bit. So we're getting rid of that sort of windy sound, that noise that comes with those mid-range frequencies. And hopefully you can hear when I bypass this EQ and then re-engage it, the attitude of the tone is still there, but we're just refining it. And I'm sure if you've watched any of my other videos on guitar, you've heard me say this 100 times, but we're just bringing it into focus, cutting out a bit of the noise, refining what we hear. Nice. And I just added a little cut here around 140, 150 for the bass to live so I can avoid that low end build up. And I kept it around 200 because I felt like that's where the guitar's chunkiness was. It wasn't actually down here. That was more rumble. Cool. So one more step that I do is use Soothe. I really like how transparent it is, and it sort of reduces those like harsher upper mid frequencies you get with guitar, and that really allows us to boost with EQ in the next step. This is optional. You might not have Soothe, it's quite expensive, but there really isn't much like it yet that I find is as good anyway. So that's the default setting. I've set it to where that hiss goes away and it still sounds quite punky. I'm going to compare that to a really cool preset that comes with Soothe, and that is de-digitized software amp. For some reason the trim is always up. So let's compare the two of them, see which one sounds better. Right, about there. I'm going to switch here on this A to B bit in the plugin up here. Switch between our first default setting and this de-digitized setting, and we'll see what sounds better. I prefer de-digitizing that one. Okay, now on to some boosting EQ. I'm going to start with my SSL channel from Waves, my ancient plugin that I still love. I'm going to give it an 8K shelf probably. I'm just going to find the point where it opens it up but doesn't get thin and harsh. And with this, I always set a bit of a slope on the top end. Let's go for 14K here. They're really, really gentle. And I like the gentle curve because it just sort of rolls it off in a smooth way. Yeah, so suddenly it opens up with a bit of bite and a bit of energy. Let's compare it off and on. Cool, brought it back a little bit, but yeah, that's sounding pretty decent. Now's a good time to hear it with the whole mix. Yeah, I like it. I think I just need to bring it forward a little bit. So I'll use this Renaissance Axe compressor, which is great on aggressive guitars from Waves. And all you really have control of here is the threshold and how slow you want the attack to be. It really brings the guitars forward. And I actually use this to find the level of guitar I want as well. So I'll let it make the guitars louder because I use it to help me sit the guitars in place. We've got a tiny little bit of palm muting happening, so I'm just going to use the Andy Sneap multiband trick to control the low end when the palm mutes are happening. Yeah, cool. Now a tiny bit of tape saturation just to finish it off, and I'll use Saturn 2 for this. And And there you have it. Just quickly, if you make music like this and you want me to mix your next song, then head over to my website, terrybeckleyrecording.com, scroll to the bottom and fill out the contact form that's there. Let me know you're interested and I will get back to you. So let's move on to amp number 2 now, and that's from ML Sound Labs. Our mixing chain is going to be very similar each time, so I won't talk through it as much. And then at the end, once we've done all 4, we'll compare the tones. So this is the ML800 from ML Sound Labs, and this is its default setting, straight onto the DI. Yeah, and a shout out to ML Sound Labs. All their amps sound incredible. Off the bat, that sounded so much closer to the punky tone you'd want than the Brainworx one. The Brainworx was obviously pretty high gain, pretty thick. This is also high gain, but it's a bit more punky. It's not as thick, it's a bit thinner. It's got a bit more of that classic punk sound that you would expect. So let's dial this in. It's very hard for me to decide now on how much gain I want, because it does still sound quite defined. Where it's not as muddy as the other amp, you can get away with a bit more gain, and that definition stays there. Let me hear it in context. Yeah, personal preference. I prefer it lower gain a little bit, so I'm going to go around the 4. But this is one you can crank a bit higher if you want a bit more gain and you don't lose as much definition. You still do lose a bit, and it does sync the guitars, the pick attack and stuff sort of disappears a little bit. But it depends what kind of sound you're after. You know, I like to hear a nice defined, clear rhythm tone. If you're more into the proper distorted punk stuff, then this might be the amp for you. Right, let's dial in some of the bass, mid and treble. Yeah, that's like a nice rough balance to go with, and then we can refine it with EQ. I'm going to open up this pedal board now because I think I'm hearing the strums distorting a little bit more than the rest of the tone than the sustain. That's more of a low gain sort of edge of breakup sound. I'm going to just use the compressor just to make sure the level of distortion is even throughout the whole performance. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm after. So have another listen. We'll put it into solo actually. With the compressor off, see if you can hear that when the compressor is off, the strums provide more breakup and more gain than the sustain. When I put the compressor on, that distortion sort of carries on throughout the whole performance of the chorus. So I'll start off and I'll turn it on. Yeah, that's quite important to me actually. I think you get like a distortion push when the guitar is being strummed with the compressor off. When it's on, you get that even distortion. Next thing I'm going to do is use the drive pedal as I would in a studio, pretending it's a tube screamer. Bit of tone to give us a bit of openness and top end, and the drive off, so that really helps control low mids. It's one of those things that can sound better, can sound worse, and you just have to audition it. I like it, but I'm now going to bring the distortion on the amp down just a tad because I think that's added gain to the whole signal. Yeah, this is sounding really good and I'm really impressed with this. So I'm going to add, like I did previously, the Shep 73, and I'm going to drive the input and pull the output down like I did before. Doesn't that sound really bright now without the track? But I think with the track in, it sort of fits nicely. Yeah, it's really guitar forward. It's that kind of tone. We're obviously going to control the harshness and hopefully keep the brightness. And with that, let's bring up some EQ. Just like before, set the filters, deal with the resonances, and refine the mids. That's the filter set, and you can see, I can see from the curve just how overly prominent the upper mids are, so we're going to deal with that now. Yeah, much smoother. I can really hear that mid-range poking out now, so I'm going to deal with that. Let's hear a quick off and on of the EQ, make sure we're not doing damage. Yeah, that's a really important EQ move then. You hear it just clean up all the bits we don't want and keep everything we do. And now on to soothe, to smooth out and soothe in those upper mids that I feel like I'm becoming more and more sensitive to the more this tone is blasting me in the face. Yep, and I'll compare that again with de-digitize. Now let's A-B them. Yep, de-digitize wins again. Now I'm going to bring in the whole mix and we'll set that shelf. Might not need one because they're already quite present in this mix. set to 0.4 of a decibel, barely doing anything, but just lifts it ever so slightly. You could easily get away with not doing it. So in the interest of fairness, we're going to do that same compressor move now so that we can compare them equally. Nice. There's less need for the C4 this time, the multi-band compressor, because it doesn't have as much in terms of like low mids. But I'm going to dial it in anyway because it does affect the tone a little bit. So I'll dial it in as before, dealing with those sort of lower mid-range frequencies. And then finished off with a bit of Saturn 2. Yeah, really like that one. So moving on to Amplitube 5 now, which is our third JCM 800 amp. And the default setting for Amplitube 5 is actually Brit 8000, which is a JCM 800. You can see it's a Marshall amp there. So I'm going to set it to stereo because all the other amps are running in stereo as well. And let's get dialing. I love how that sounds straight away. This is more for that lower gain sort of crunchy punk sound. And straight away, it's got a well-balanced, smooth frequency response. So we'll just dial in the gain and a bit of the EQ stuff, and then we'll move on. Yeah, I think it's quite close. We can pretty much move on. I want to do the same thing that I did with the ML Sound Labs, where you put a compressor before it, and I'll use Amplitube for that because it has some great pedals and stuff built in. Let's try this Fender compression pedal. Yeah, cool. And then we're going to use a tube screamer like we did with the other ones. Same as before, we're going to set the overdrive to pretty much off. A little bit of tone. Let's hear that. Yeah, this is far smoother, less sort of that dirt punk sort of sound and a bit more of that sort of modern, smoother distortion. So let's use the Shep 73 again to emulate analog hardware on our input chain. Nice, now we'll get into some EQ. Yeah, filter's done, resonance is done. Now let's refine those mids. And that's compare off and on. Yeah, good. Obviously, this is a lot of distorted guitar in our faces, so I think I'm getting more and more sensitive to the harshness as we go. But that's why I've ordered them this way, because I wanted to go from distorted through to sort of like more crunchy with each amp. So now our soothe step. And let's compare the two. Yeah, I prefer the factory default on that one. Now it's time to do our shelf with our SSL EQ. And I'll do it in the context of the mix now to give my ears a bit of a break. Set the filter, about 14K, and let's go. It's a really, really smooth sounding tone. I really like it. And if you think back to the other two tones, how different do they all sound? But they're all JCM 800. That's why I felt the need to make this video. Now for our compression. So back to the Renaissance axe. And then quickly deal with those palm mutes. And then finished off with tape saturation from Saturn 2. If you noticed previously, I always audition the tape and the tube just to see which I prefer. I just love how smooth that saturation makes the guitar sound, and it's tape every time at the moment. It just doesn't feel finished and alive until I put that tape saturation on it. Hear it one more time, bypassed, off and on. Just really seeps into the whole mix when I put that on. Doesn't stick out as much. Really cool. So our final amp is my absolute favorite. And if you've watched any video I've ever done with any guitar in it, it's 99% of the time going to have this Archetype Nolly amp sim from Neural DSP. It is the most expensive by quite a bit, but it just has some magic to it that I can't find in other amps. So I always use this first. And then if I find I just need a bit of a different vibe, then I'll reach for a different JCM 800. But most of the time, it's a JCM 800 amp sim, and most of the time it's this because I just love how it sounds. It can be distorted, it can be smooth, it can be low gain, and of course you get other amps in it too. I don't have any kind of discount code or affiliation with them. I just love Neural DSP, and I just think this is my favorite amp sim that I've ever heard. So let's start it in. just does everything so well. I can have it lower gain, I can have more gain to it, thick, thin, different cabs, they all sound fantastic. So onto our analog input chain emulation. Fantastic, onto the EQ, and I'll set those filters, deal with the resonances, and refine the mids. Okay, let's have a quick comparison. Yeah, really smooths out that tone, doesn't it? And keeps all the good stuff and removes the stuff that sort of you don't realise is distracting you until it's gone. So now on to Soothe 2. And we'll set the de-digitize as well, see which we prefer. Oh, this is really hard because they both offer different things. Do I want a bit of thickness and chunkiness, or do I want a bit more smooth with a bit more upper mids? I'm going to go with the factory on this one because it gives us a bit more bite and a bit more of the upper mids. The other tones we have, the Brainworx gave us that sort of thicker tone anyway, so we're better when we compare them. Okay, and then onto our 8K shelf. So I'll set the filter as usual, about 14K, and we'll do the 8K shelf. Nice, onto the compression. Bit of C4 for those palm mutes. So like always, set this to sort of like 350-ish, so we catch those lower mid chunky frequencies that jump out on those palm mutes. And lastly, we'll finish it off with my favourite part of this chain, which is my tape saturation from Saturn II. Cool, I'm sure you're so sick of hearing this song by now, this looping chorus. But now's the best part, where we get to compare all four tones. So I'm going to do them in order. We're going to start with Brainworx, move to the ML Sound Labs, then to the Amplitube, then to the Neural DSP. I will have gain or volume match them beforehand, so you get the best comparison, and then you can choose which style of JCM 800 that you want. Okay, let's start with Brainworx. ML Sound Labs. Amplitube 5. Archetype Nolly from Neural DSP. I definitely know what my favourite is, but hopefully this has given you some insight as to which kind of sound you want for your own music. You know what kind of band and artist you are, so which of these kind of JCM 800 styles, if this is the amp you're looking at, fit best with the music you want to put out there. I specialise in pop punk mixing, so if you want me to mix your music to get the sound along the same vein as what you have here, check out my website, have a listen to bands I've mixed previously, and then drop me a message on the contact form. And if you want to see my 6-step process to dialing in any amp sim to get a great tone, then watch this video here. Check out my channel for all kinds of mixing pop punk videos. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.